Welcome to the OA Sponsorship Success Marathon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Viviana, and I am your moderator for this sponsorship success segment on breaking down the barriers for both parties. I would like to introduce Anne from Region 2, who will be qualifying and then sharing on this sponsorship topic. The speaker will also give 2 questions for discussion or future consideration at the end.
My name is Anne, grateful recovering compulsive overeater from Region 2. I've been in programs since 1980. My first meeting was in April 1980, but at that time I was too busy to go back, and I didn't get back until August. But since August of 1980, I have been attending Overeaters Anonymous meetings consistently. I've never had to leave, and I feel really, really grateful for that because I've seen a lot of people come and go, and some come back, and some don't. So I'm really, really grateful for that. I have imperfect abstinence since 1982, so that's a big part of, more than half my life. That's what amazes me is that I've been in program more than half my life, and to compare my life before and now is beyond my wildest dreams. I love this program. I've done a lot of service. When I came to this program, I never felt part of. I never felt part of my family or any place else. I always felt that I was on the outside looking in. And when I came in program and I started to do service, I started to feel part of that. This was my fellowship, my peeps, the people that I identified with, the people who understood about eating food out of the freezer and out of the garbage and in the car and whatever. And so I really felt part of, I felt understood. And that was a big, big change in my life. So I am very, very grateful for that. So let me get to my topic about breaking down the barriers. I remember the first time I checked on the sign-in sheet that I was a sponsor. The first time I checked the box as a sponsor, there was that fear that someone would call me. What am I going to do if someone calls me? And then the second fear was, what if nobody calls me? So that's kind of the story of my life, is that both ways I'm going to be afraid. But I got over that. I really got to the point where I really loved sponsoring, and I still do. I still do love sponsoring. From the sponsee side, I remember how hard it was to make that first call. It was really hard because, of course, I thought I was going to be bothering people. Heaven forbid that I bother somebody. The other thing is that, I'm a strong, independent woman, and that did not serve me in this program. I needed to be able to rely on other people, to reach out, to receive support. That was a really big thing, to receive support. One of the things as a sponsor is not to allow anyone to put me on a pedestal. Because if I've been put on a pedestal, I will eventually fall. It's just the nature of the human condition that I will eventually fall. That is not of any service to me or to anyone else. So I try to remind sponsees all the time that I'm just another compulsive overeater, living life one day at a time, working the steps, working the traditions, and showing up at meetings and doing service, that I'm no better than, no worse than anyone else. Also, to remind sponsees that you are not bothering me when you call me. It's something I've signed up for. That it's not, you are not bothering me or interrupting me when you call. I've signed up for this. That's the best thing to remember, and to remind my sponsees whenever I talk to them about thank you for calling, or thank you for meeting with me, because I get as much from it as they do. One of the things, a barrier for me as a sponsor, is not to get too many sponsees. I remember there was one time whenever the phone would ring, I would immediately get resentful because I had agreed to sponsor too many people. Now, when I'm resentful, that is not to my benefit or to my sponsee's benefit. That's one of the things I really have to think about. The more service I do above the group level, the more I need to really look at how much time do I have to commit to sponsoring. So that's definitely something to be evaluated from the sponsor side. Another thing that I believe as a sponsor is that my job is to direct my sponsees toward their solution. They have their solution. I'm not doing my sponsee a favor if I let them spend all the time we talk complaining about what's happening in their life. So it's one of the things that I ask them to do is I will say, okay, that end of complaining, what's the solution? What step are you on? And I think that that's part of my job, and that breaks down a barrier for me as a sponsor, because it's really hard to listen to something that's only complaining when what I know works for me is to work the steps. One of the other things that helps for me as a sponsor is to have boundaries. And I believe that most people in Overeaters Anonymous do not have good boundaries. I know that's a generalization. That's been my experience, is most of us do not have good boundaries. I believe that part of my job as a sponsor to have good boundaries, and that way to model how to have boundaries. If I tell someone that I have 15 minutes to talk, I don't have any more than that, and I will set a timer and I will tell them, okay, I've set the timer for 15 minutes because that's really all I have right now. So when the timer goes off, then we need to be done. That's one of the ways I've taught people to set boundaries. Just as a member of OA, I also do compulsive overservice. What I've done in the past is that if somebody asks me to do something, instead of answering yes or no right then, I will say I have to talk to my sponsor. And my sponsor knows because I've complained to her about taking on too much, and that was what we came up with as a solution, was to not take on anything more without talking to her so we could talk it through. So that was another way that I could use my sponsor to help me set boundaries around what I'm doing and what I'm taking on. The big thing for me is sponsoring is the best. I love sponsoring. I love what I hear people doing when they're working the traditions, when working steps. I love to acknowledge their growth, because I think that's one of my jobs as a sponsor, is to acknowledge the growth of my sponsees, because it's hard to see my own growth. If it's acknowledged from outside, it's like, oh, yeah, you're doing better at setting boundaries. Good job. You told your client that you needed to get back to him about when you could get this job done, and so on, because that is how I can avoid resentment, and I think that that's a big part of teaching my sponsees about how to set boundaries. The questions I have are, what is your biggest barrier to becoming a sponsor? And the second one, what is your biggest barrier to getting a sponsor? Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Ann, for sharing. The opinion expressed here today are those of individual OA members and do not represent OA as a whole. Our seventh tradition, please remember that we are self-supporting through our own contributions. Please use a special workshop meeting number 82278 when making your contribution. The World Service Office needs our support to continue to serve our fellowship. Go to www.oa.org and click on Contributions. Thank you for helping us carry the message.